It's a cold November night in 1992, and two little boys are running barefoot through the dark streets of suburban Georgia. They're shivering, their clothes are soaked with blood, and one of them is clutching his younger brother's hand like his life depends on it. When they finally reach a stranger's porch, the older boy gasps out the only words he can manage: "My mom needs help." Those boys were 6-year-old Ricky Tokars and his 4-year-old brother, Mike. Just moments earlier, they had watched their mother, Sara, be shot at point-blank range. She was dead before they could even process what had happened. The killer vanished into the night, leaving the children trapped in a nightmare that would haunt them forever. The murder stunned their quiet neighborhood of East Marietta, just outside Atlanta. On the surface, the Tokars family looked picture perfect: a respected attorney for a father, a devoted stay-at-home mom, and two bright, happy kids. But behind closed doors, secrets had been building for years, secrets so dangerous that Sara feared they could cost her life. And in the end, she was right. This is the story of how a mother tried to protect her children from the man she once loved, and how her courage, even in death, helped bring a killer to justice. Sara Ambresco Tokars grew up in a big, close-knit family in Florida, one of 7 sisters. She was known for her kindness, her easy laugh, and her absolute devotion to her children. When she met Fred Tokars, a young district attorney, she believed she'd found someone who shared her values. In 1985, they married, and over the next few years they welcomed their 2 sons, Ricky and Mike. From the outside, Fred was a success story. He built a reputation as a smart, ambitious lawyer, eventually leaving the DA's office to start his own practice. But Sara soon discovered another side of him. Fred was rarely home, his temper was quick, and his work connections seemed shady. Strange phone calls would come at all hours, and when Sara answered, the caller would hang up without a word. Her unease grew when she found a gun hidden in the family car, right where her toddler son could have found it. That moment changed everything. She began to suspect that Fred's work wasn't just stressful, it was dangerous. Sara confided in her sisters that she was afraid, not just for herself but for her boys. She suspected infidelity. She hired a private investigator, who confirmed Fred was cheating. And then came the discovery that sealed her fear: documents linking her husband to illegal activities. She hid copies of those papers with her sister, Chrissy, along with chilling instructions: "If anything happens to me, take these to the police." Sara had no way of knowing just how soon Chrissy would have to follow through on that promise. Thanksgiving 1992 started like so many before it for the Ambresco family. Sara, Ricky, and Mike drove down to Florida to spend the holiday with her sisters. It was a warm, happy gathering, the kind of family Sara loved most. Fred had come down too, but claimed he needed to leave early for a meeting in Alabama, so Sara planned to drive home alone with the boys a few days later. On November 29th, after a long 8-hour drive, they finally reached their home in East Marietta late at night. The neighborhood was quiet, the house dark. Sara pulled into the driveway, letting her youngest, Mike, sleep in the back seat while she walked Ricky and their dog, Jake, inside. That's when a man stepped out of the shadows, a gun in his hand. Without warning, he ordered them back to the car. Sara's voice trembled as she pleaded for her children's safety, but the man forced her into the driver's seat, Ricky beside her, and climbed in behind her, the gun aimed at her head. He told her where to drive, turning down street after street. Ricky didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel his mother's fear. Then, with no warning, the man raised the gun and fired. Sara slumped forward. The car veered off the road, crashing into a ditch. The gunman bolted, leaving 2 terrified children alone with their mother's lifeless body. Shaken but determined, Ricky remembered what his mom had taught him: don't stay in a running car. He turned off the ignition, unbuckled Mike, and led him into the night, toward the nearest light he could see. When the stranger at the porch saw the two blood-covered boys, he called police immediately. Officers arrived to find Sara's body still in the car, the crime scene giving off strange signals. At first glance, it looked like a burglary gone wrong. Drawers pulled open, items moved, but nothing valuable had been taken. And there was no sign of forced entry. From Ricky's description, the shooter was a black male carrying what he called a pirate gun. But beyond that, investigators had little to go on. Fred was questioned right away. He broke down when told of Sara's death, claiming he had no idea who could have done such a thing. He said their marriage was fine. But Sara's family painted a different picture, one of control, fear, and growing hostility. Then came a break. Sara's sister turned over the documents Sara had hidden, evidence that Fred might be tied to illegal business dealings. Detectives also learned he'd recently taken out 3 separate life insurance policies on Sara, worth a total of $1.75 million. Weeks later, a tip came in. A woman told police her brother, Curtis Roa, had come home the night of the murder with blood on his clothes and had admitted to shooting a woman. Roa confessed, but claimed he'd been hired for the job by a man named Eddie Lawrence. When police dug deeper, they discovered Lawrence wasn't just some random criminal. He was Fred Tokars' business partner. And that connection changed everything. Once Eddie Lawrence realized police had enough evidence to tie him to the murder, he finally spoke. He admitted that Fred Tokars had approached him with a deadly request: kill Sara, because she knew too much. Lawrence claimed he couldn't bring himself to do it, so he hired Curtis Roa for $5,000 to carry out the hit. When he asked Fred why he didn't just divorce her, Fred's response was chilling: that won't keep her quiet. She knows too much. And when Lawrence reminded him of his 2 young sons, Fred allegedly said, they'll get over it. In August 1993, 9 months after Sara's murder, police set up a sting. Knowing Fred was frustrated with reporters, they disguised themselves as journalists and gathered outside the building where he was staying with his sons. Fred came out to confront them, and that's when officers moved in. He was arrested without the boys ever being in harm's way. The trials began in 1995. Curtis Roa tried to argue the shooting was an accident. But 8-year-old Ricky, now old enough to understand what he'd seen, gave a detailed account of that night. To protect him from facing his father directly, his testimony was read to the jury. In the end, all 3 men, Roa, Lawrence, and Fred Tokars, were convicted. Fred and Lawrence were sentenced to life in prison. Roa also received life for pulling the trigger. After Fred's arrest, Ricky and Mike were placed with their mother's family. Their grandparents stepped in to raise them, surrounding them with the love and stability Sara had always wanted for her boys. They cut all contact with their father. The Ambresco family made sure Sara's story was never forgotten. They spoke publicly about her bravery, about the way she had gathered evidence against Fred, knowing the risks. To them, she had not only protected her children in life, but also in death, making sure the truth would come out if anything happened to her. Fred Tokars would spend the rest of his life in prison, stripped of his law license, his reputation destroyed. Lawrence and Roa would also remain behind bars. But justice, while necessary, didn't erase the trauma for 2 young boys who had watched their mother die. For Ricky, the memories of that night never faded. But he refused to let them define him. He found purpose in the ocean, building a life in the surfing industry, traveling the world, and surrounding himself with people who made him feel safe. The murder of Sara Tokars is more than a story about greed, betrayal, and violence. It's about the quiet strength of a mother who saw danger coming and acted to protect her children, even when she couldn't save herself. Fred Tokars believed killing his wife would silence her forever. But the truth she left behind, in her words, her warnings, and the documents she hid, spoke louder than he ever could have imagined. Ricky once said, "Being angry is tiring." He chose not to forgive his father, but he also chose not to let hatred consume his life. That choice, in itself, is a kind of victory, proof that even in the shadow of something so dark, it's possible to step into the light. And maybe that's Sara's final gift to her sons, the knowledge that love and resilience can outlast even the worst kind of loss.